Nakum was the dominant tribe of this season, I would say, and most people would agree with me, as they won the most tribal immunities and in general were just a beefier tribe than Yasha. Ironically, Nakum became a dying breed once the merge rolled around, with just 3 left at only the final 8. And this is because of the swap, which put a lot of Nakums in jeopardy, some of them even on their original Nakum tribe. That being said, I think Nakum had more of the memorable characters than Yasha did, for better or for worse. And I'm starting off this ranking with number 9, Jim, the first boot, and it kills me to put Jim this low. But the fact of the matter is that he was the first boot, and an obvious one at that. He sort of started out as the father of the tribe and was doing pretty well, save for a little slip up in health on the second day, but they had just hiked 11 miles. Could he blame him? At the first immunity challenge, he injured his arm pretty badly. I think he either dislocated it or he pulled a muscle. It was something to do with one of his arms, and even though there were others on Nakum that were banged up pretty badly, Jim was by far in the worst shape by the first tribal council, and it was pretty obvious he was gone. Blake started off his journey in rough shape, with a barbed branch falling on his shoulder only a few hours into the game. After that, he was just malnourished in general, as most of the men on Nakum were, but once he got back into shape, he was a physical asset for his team. Nakum is safe for the next 2 episodes after the premiere, and from there it's time to swap the tribes, which is Blake switching to Yasha along with Bobby John, Brandon, and Dani. It's looking like they are just gonna roll over Gary, Brian, and Amy, but his safety on the new tribe was their safety on the new, everyone's safety on the new tribe was far overestimated. See, the better he felt in the game, the cockier he got. He sort of developed this frat boy persona, going on to brag about his girlfriend and other experiences he's had seemingly just for the sake of gloating. And this started to annoy his tribe mates, even some of his fellow Nakum. And it's here that Brian famously continues to ask him questions about his very exciting life back home in an attempt to fan the flames and make Blake look even more of a target than he already was, and it worked, as he was able to swing Dani over to their side for at least this vote, sending Blake home as early as only the 5th vote. I didn't have a problem with Brooke. She was just severely under-edited, and that's not often a good thing. She was ultimately pretty safe for the first 3 episodes, and even at the swap, things seemed pretty chill at New Nakum, as it was a 4-4 split between Stephanie, Rafe, Lydia, and Jamie on one side, and then Brooke, Judd, Margaret, and Cindy on the other. However, Judd was more of a wild card than he appeared, and ended up bonding more with the former Yashas. He even voted with them, forming a new super alliance within the tribe, and they set their sights on Brooke, sending her home right after the swap as they lost the next immunity. If Stephanie's game in Guatemala was pretty bad, then Bobby John's was downright abysmal. No, actually, I take that back. He didn't even have a game to play. The entire time he was out there, he was either really safe or so deep in danger that he was essentially powerless. The most moves he ever really made were after the swap, where he actually had to work to keep his allies safe, especially with Dani. There was a slight chance that they might lose a few numbers while they were there, but after that, he was back to just being a sitting duck at the merge, just sort of watching his allies get voted out one by one, until he himself was voted out as the first juror. And sure, you can argue that he was a huge help for his team physically, but he didn't really stick out like he did in Palau, as he always had people on his tribe like Blake and Brandon. The only good thing I can say about his game is that, like Stephanie, he seemingly wasn't targeted just for being a returning player. Besides that, the most memorable Bobby John moments in Guatemala for me is his constant fighting with Jamie, because how aggressive and animated their fights got. Sometimes it looked like they were both celebrating a win with each other instead of going at each other. For example, the immunity challenge and the double elimination with that big ball they had to roll around. If you showed me their fight in that episode without any context, I would have told you they were just getting riled up. I do think Margaret was voted out too early, and sort of like Brian, she was robbed because of the swap. That being said, she didn't have the same potential to win as I think Brian had, but she was still a likable character nonetheless. She was quite literally the nurse of the tribe, as not only was that her occupation in real life, but because as early as day 1, she had to take care of all the ailing men who were exhausted from the 11-mile hike to camp. Because of this, she seemed to be safe for a while, despite her responsible side sort of starting to rub her tribe mates the wrong way. I guess I sort of see her as the equivalent to players like Kathy, Dina, and Yolanda. But things get even worse for her in episode 4, with the new Nakum tribe being a split battlefield and her number one enemy in Judd being the one to flip to the Yasha side. It's actually shocking that Margaret wasn't the first swap boot, as she was probably weaker than either Brooke or Cindy, but I guess they just chose to keep her. Then at the double elimination, her and Judd get into one of the biggest tribal council fights ever seen, where Margaret clearly ends up on top of the fight as Judd acts like a little child, but for some reason Judd's sudden temporary flameout isn't enough to get him voted out, and Margaret is sent home instead. It really was a shame because she had some potential, I do think. She just found herself on the wrong side of the Nakum tracks at the end. Brandon was probably the best example of a player who changed my opinion of him halfway through the game. Starting out, I think he seemed a little bit cocky, a little bit too big for his britches, kind of a know-it-all. But he first redeemed himself of that when he somewhat backed his cockiness up by being one of the biggest physical assets for his tribe. Later on, he would seem to be legitimately good at the game and appeared to not just care about himself, but his allies as well. I honestly do think that he was one of the best performers in tribe challenges we had seen on the show yet, and because of that, he was always safe at any tribal council he went to. But things went south for him at the merge. As it's already been established, the post-swap Yasha was outnumbered going into the merge, and Brandon's identity as a team player was flipped to a public enemy number 1, or I guess public target number 1, is he was more of a threat than an enemy, and by public, I just mean post-swap Nakum. So after Gary won first individual immunity, it was pretty much game over for Brandon, even though it wasn't exactly clear that he was going, as Bobby John's name was thrown around, and even Jamie's was too, as he had gotten kind of edgy with the Yashas and basically made it clear that the post-swap Nakums were sticking together. Such a shame. He was this close to making it to the jury, and he probably has the saddest merge boot I've seen yet. Judd is an underrated villain in the classic Age of Survivor. At the beginning of the season, he was this workhorse. He was one of the biggest physical assets for Nakum, but all the while, his tribe hated him. He was loud, obnoxious, and rude, but once the swap sent some original Yasha over to his camp, he proved to also be a ruthless game player. He flipped over the Yashas with little hesitation while mercilessly watching his own original tribe mates get voted out one by one. Then at the merge, he continued to act like he was king of the camp, and carried on the trend of him being a villain as he lied about the clue to the very first ever hidden immunity idol that he had earned as a reward. He was obviously caught by Gary when his memes of searching directly contradicted where he said the idol was, as he was looking up in the trees when he said that it was on the ground. So Judd is at the final 6, and the only person left not in his alliance is Dani. At this point, his negative qualities are really starting to show more as there are less people left. And on top of that, he won the Loved One Visit Challenge, which always ruffles some feathers. It was actually during the food auction that challenge was, but he did place the highest bid, so I'm saying that he won that. Then, to make matters even worse for him, Dani wins immunity, meaning that the post-swap Nakum alliance has to vote out one of their own, and Judd was the prime target aside from maybe Lydia. He was blindsided badly, and it was really angry when he was voted out. Now, that being said, I think he still goes even if Dani didn't win immunity. Dani was already starting to work over the others, and considering Judd's status as the abrasive and rude leech on Shakum, it wouldn't be out of the question that they would target Judd anyways. At first, I didn't really accept Dani as the winner of this season. She just didn't seem to be that prominent in the beginning of the game, with the first and only real move she made pre-merge being the one vote she flipped on at the Blake boot. Her troubles really did begin at the merge when she was greatly outnumbered by the post-swap Nakum alliance, but her likability got her further than her other allies. Once there were only a few people left in the game, she had gotten in better with people like Stephanie and Rafe, even making a final 2 deal with the latter. The other thing she did to secure the win was pull off some clutch immunity wins. Sure, I said that her final 6 immunity wasn't super necessary, as Judd may have gone anyways, but hey, who knows for sure. Because of those things, she found herself sitting at the final 2, and her come-from-behind victory and excellent social game seemed more impressive to the jury than Stephanie's game. In a way, her win reminds me of Chris Doherty's from Vanuatu, the only difference being he was in danger far sooner than Dani was. So yeah, I sort of changed my mind. She's a pretty solid winner and a more memorable player than I first realized, especially with her discovery of Gary's true identity, and hey, compared to the winner of next season, anybody looks good with the million. Okay, now would be a good time to reiterate that these rankings aren't solely by gameplay or how good they were. As I've said many times, even at the Big Brother videos, this is just like my personal feelings, and because if so, Cindy would be further down on this list, but part of it is still my personal preference to the player. And I'll be honest, Cindy was probably my favorite person on this cast, with Rafe and Gary being extremely close seconds. There was just something so charming about Cindy as a person. Her southern accent and the fact that she's a zookeeper are just adorable, and at the loved one's visit when we find out that she has a twin, come on, I'm not even joking. Cindy is like Nalea from Marquesas, but better. That all in mind, however, she wasn't exactly a supreme strategist. She did sort of coast to the end, and even though I didn't expect her to side with the rest of post-swap Nakum at the merge, as she wasn't part of that alliance before the merge, hey, she did make it all the way to the final 5, so she probably made the smart choice. But then she made a dumb choice. You see, Dani could have gone at the final 5, as she was still sort of the odd man out. But then Cindy just has to win the car reward challenge, testing the fate of the car curse. But this time, Jeff Probst gives her the chance to wash her hands of it, and in return give the other 4 cars of their own. But Cindy decides to hold on to her car because she earned it, and she wanted to be the one to break the car curse, which, in her defense, those are 2 totally legitimate reasons, but this is Survivor. Legitimacy usually means diddly squat, especially in this context. So, of course, she annoys everyone with this move, especially Rafe, and it was the final nail in her coffin. And I say final because even at the beginning of this episode, it wasn't looking too good for her because she was left out of the loop at the Judd blindside, so it appeared that she was already on the outs. Now, I wonder what would have happened if she flipped to post-swap Shaw at the merge, and one of 2 things would happen instead. Either way, the merge vote would be a 5-5 tie in this case, and if Cindy's side loses the tiebreaker, she probably does go next. That is, if they figure out if it was her, which they probably would. Or post-swap Nakum loses that tiebreaker and everyone on that side goes 1 by 1. That leaves the final 5 being Cindy, Brandon, Bobby John, Gary, and Dani. I think that they would target Gary from there, but if he still has the immunity idol in this hypothetical, he could use it, where I'm not sure who goes instead. If Dani doesn't side with Cindy, I think she still goes at the final 5, with Gary following suit, leaving the final 3 of Brandon, Bobby John, and Dani. And now I know Cindy's out of this hypothetical, but, we can't stop here. I'd say that either Brandon or Bobby John win final immunity. Either way, they take each other, and I think in this case, Brandon wins Survivor Guatemala. But if Dani does side with Cindy at the final 5, and so does Gary, who would be the swing vote in this case, then Bobby John and Brandon likely go back-to-back. Dani wins final immunity and takes Cindy. Now, there's an interesting predicament. Who wins between Dani or Cindy? Does post-swap Nakum vote for Cindy even though she betrayed them? Or does Dani still play a respectable game in this scenario? So in conclusion, had Cindy decided to flip on her side at the merge, she would have finished in either 9th, 5th, or 2nd place. But this what if gets so specific that there's no saying what would have happened. For not a super memorable player, she contributed a lot to this season, and looking at those hypotheticals, she'd have played an even bigger part to this season. So there we go, we have finally finished Survivor Guatemala, and I'm not sure what video I'm going to make next. It probably will not be Survivor, and there will be a Masked Singer video coming out soon, too, but I don't know. I'm not sure exactly. I think I do know what video is coming out next, but it's not Survivor themed. So, taking a little break from Survivor. But make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you later.